Hey y'all, Grello here. Man, it's been a great week. First of all, I love the holidays. I'm looking forward to turkey and stuffing and mashed potatoes tomorrow here in America. Anyway, I think our friends to the north already celebrated something like this, and I'm not sure about anyone else. But second of all, Intrepid is keeping Ashes of Creation up all week, which has been very nice bonus for those with the week off. And finally, with Star Citizen, we're a few days into IAE. I hope you all are enjoying that. As part of this, CIG did a few IAE shows, and in each of these, there was an interview about upcoming game mechanics. So I wanted to watch these interviews with y'all and see what's up together. If you have not seen the originals, I encourage you to go watch them. They're actually pretty funny. I really appreciated the video of that's circulating around that like kind of compared the Mariah Fury with with Airwolf. Like it ran like the Mariah Fury video alongside the Airwolf intro. I've been around long enough that I actually watched that Airwolf intro many times on a tube TV with rabbit ears. I can't say I love the show because I wasn't quite old enough to remember a lot about it, but I did remember the intro. I remember my family enjoying the show. And one last thing before we roll the clips, and I honestly cannot believe I'm saying this, but I'm close to 1,000 subs. I'm not the kind of guy to blare sirens and ask for folks to smash the sub button, but that doesn't mean I'm not extremely thankful for so many people considering me worthy of a sub. It still just blows me away. It was a little over a month ago that I published my first video, and I honestly expected that to be the only video I ever published. I literally called the channel Grollo's Video. Now, I've since renamed it. But that video got so many comments and questions that I felt compelled to do another video that answered some and talked about some things. And then that video got a bunch of comments and discussion, and so I felt compelled to do another one, and so on and so forth. And before you know it, I had a few videos up, and I was just having so much fun with the community that began to spring up around this that I now find myself thinking all the time, like, maybe I should do a video on that. And just for context, I mean, this is all just within the past month or so. This has become a thing that I now think about, and then it's just been really cool and really fun. And I'm rambling, but the point was that I wanted to do an AMA as a way of like kind of marking this milestone. So I'm making a community post here on YouTube. I'm going to put a link to it in the description below. If you have a question about literally anything, me, games, work, pizza, whatever, ask it on the community post. And if you see another person's question that you like, give it a thumbs up, and I will round up all the questions from that post. I'll sort them by thumbs, and I'll do a quick video to answer them. I'll leave the post up for as long as it takes to get enough questions. And we'll go from there. Looking forward to that. So with that out of the way, let's roll the clips.
Welcome to the IAE show, brought to you from New Babbage, the site of this year's Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, and your guide to the future of spacecraft and vehicles in the verse. Up next, we discuss A Time to Kill with Rich Tyra, John Crew, and Jared Huckabee. Don't change the channel, it's the IAE show, and it starts right now.
All right, thank you so much. Welcome to the IAE show. I'm Jared. We're here talking with Rich and John about the future of space combat, spaceship operations in our Persistent Universe game. There's a couple topics we're going to cover, one today and then two more as we go. I want to talk about something that is at the core of the entire spaceship experience, and that's time to kill. Now, right now in Star Citizen, as players have known it since 2015, your ship can take a few shots and then it goes, poof, fiery explosion. A very impressive fiery explosion. Shout out to Mike Snowden and his team there. But that's not the experience that we've been building towards. And a lot of the changes that we announced at CitizenCon with insurance and whatnot, these are tied into the future direction of spaceships and life on board spaceships. Talk to me about time to kill. How long are these ships supposed to last? Are they supposed to go up like confetti like they currently do? And what's the vision for space combat supposed to be?
I think the first thing we need to talk about is moving away from time to kill and move towards time to disable. Because in the PU, ships are not always going to explode, but we want you to be in that loop of wanting to own your ship. Loss should matter. And we want you to put time and effort into your ship, and that means time and effort into keeping your ship alive, and if something does happen, getting it back.
We've talked about physicalized damage in the past. Is this just a matter of getting that physicalized damage system in, or is there more to it than this?
First off, physicalized damage is tied to our Maelstrom system, which you probably didn't know, but we saw for the first time in action for the Squadron demo. All the ships, for example, in the turret sequence were set up with Maelstrom and using our physicalized damage system. We're moving towards more a physically based system that actually works out the speed of the projectile, the collision, and then generates the force, and that force then dictates the damage that's associated with the ship itself. And what that means is that opens up a whole new area of gameplay for piracy, taking those ships back, repairing, going back to your ship, to actually either take it back to your own crafting hangar to be able to dismantle it for resources, or if you're the pirate itself, you can actually take it to the council and get your own ID on there. But ultimately, while we have soft death in the game right now, that's kind of a faked soft death. It's kind of just a slightly move in that direction, but it's not the full physicalized system that we've been working on for a long time.
And it's so easy to overlook the gameplay that all of the things they're talking about will generate. Like, it's only been I don't know, a couple minutes into the video, and they've mentioned time to disable instead of time to kill. They've mentioned physicalized damage, where they're calculating the impact of projectiles on a ship and figuring out what kind of damage to the ship that will make, and like the need to like recover your ship, and they're just like rapid firing all this stuff, and like to the casual observer, like it would be like, okay, so what? But just put your head around the amount of gameplay all of this creates. Like, I still think it's hard to even really fathom or glimpse this in the universe today. Like the fact that because today, like, you lose a ship, you go claim it, blah blah blah. But like having to mount a rescue mission to go and reclaim your ship, I mean, that's potentially an hour of gameplay right there. A projectile puncturing your ship, starting a fire, creating like a vacuum in a room, oxygen. There's so many things that could happen just from a projectile hitting your ship that would create like this buzz of activity and gameplay. Like, oh, I need to go grab the extinguisher, or I need to go get that crate of salvage material we have sitting in the back and bring that over here so that we can use the repair gun to seal the hole in the hull. I don't know how much of this is actually a thing, but like all of this is like what I'm thinking of as I hear these guys saying this stuff. It's super exciting.
John says loss matters. It's something we need to start talking about. If I have lost my ship and it does take a long time to get back, how does that impact me if I'm playing the game? What happens if that's my only ship? And I think that's where we need to start thinking about a more complex algorithm to deal with insurance claims and how you get your ship back. And then that directly ties into the TTK or TTD, time to disable.
I disagree with that. I don't know that like we need a more complex algorithm to take into account a person's status in the universe. Like, if we're gonna take it easier on somebody because they have one ship, that seems to me like that creates an opportunity for gaming the system. That's what I think of immediately when I hear that. Like, okay, well, as an organization, then let's make sure we have enough people that only have one ship on their account so that we can send them in as a scout with minimal, I don't know. Like, I don't know if that would actually happen, but like anytime like you add complexity, like I think simplicity should be the rule. If a player only has one ship on their account and that ship is disabled and now they're wondering how to get back, like there should be systems in the game to help with that. Like maybe I can hire an NPC to take me back to my ship, or I can ask somebody in my org to help me out. Like I wouldn't want to see like timers or complex equations yielding like how long it takes to actually get an insurance claim. Like I don't know. That's just my perspective.
Just be able to get these ships back. So if you think of, say, starter ships or ships that are small in nature, so like an interceptor or some of our small racing ships, those ships should be, like I said in the 1.0 talk, should always be readily available. So if you lose those ships, we don't really want to punish the player. It needs to be a symbiosis where loss matters and it needs to be impactful to your game experience, but it can't be so impactful that it stops you playing the game. Then it essentially curves up towards the more extreme scenarios. We need to have this almost agile algorithm.
It doesn't have to stop you from playing the game. Like ideally, it would get you to engage in other aspects of the game. But I can see his point. I mean, that's not a hill I would die on arguing against.
That basically allows us to work out, like, okay, how many times have you lost your ship in the last hour? Does this player have only one ship on their account? How do we take that into account to make the player experience fair?
Of course, that's the ultimate penalty, loss of your ship. Until that point, we've got features like resource networking, which is the beginning of this time to disable, this extending the length and life of your ship to make it so that not only does it not explode right away, but the players, the members aboard the ship, have more opportunities to repair the ship. What is that experience supposed to be like on a single player ship? How do we keep that alive longer to the larger ones?
It's a two-way thing. Obviously, time to kill, time to disable is generally thought about as the aggressor's point of view, but it also matters to the victim of this combat encounter. We can't have it be so quick that you have no chance to do anything about that. So with physical damage and resource network, it moves it away from being a just sort of race to zero on the health. Items will start malfunctioning, forcing that person to make a decision of, am I going to flee? Am I going to deal with this now and take the risk? And then on the flip side, that gives you, as the aggressor, the chance to go, what do I want to do with this disabled ship now? Obviously, single seaters have less room for options in this scenario, but really the bulk of that gameplay is on the larger multi-crew ships, where you'll be moving around inside your ship, repairing, replacing relays. The engineer will be diverting power to different systems, just to sort of give everybody enough time to decide what they want to do in that scenario. And there's so many different scenarios that can be done.
Sounds like we're building a progression here. Are the larger ships intended to last longer? They have more lifespan. There's more that you can do to keep them alive. Am I sensing this right? Is there a progression here?
Absolutely. I mean, ultimately, we want you to progress in the game and build your fleet, whether that's solo or with a group. You need to be able to have some level of understanding that you're not going to lose it straight away. And the other aspect that I think is really important to see about in terms of when you say progression, it's not just progression for the TTK or TTD for across the entire spectrum of the game, or the progression for the player, the victim or the defender, or versus the attacker. When your ship is disabled, there's no way to bring that back. When we have the proper version where your ship components are gone and utilizing the physicalized damage, you can bring that ship back. And that's the huge difference. And that opens up this entire gameplay loop where you have towing and repair, and maybe somebody can repair it for you. And that's what, they've opened a nearby shop, so they're a repair
100%.
shop and they give you good chances to repair versus cheaper prices than taking it to an LZ or a space station. So I think when we talk about progression, especially from my perspective, I want to see progression across all the professions. And hopefully people start to see, and it's the reason why we wanted to talk about 1.0, people start to see how all these things connect together. There's a reason why we did all these things over the last 2 or 3 years. It's not like we were just throwing a dart at the dartboard and hoping that, what feature is next. We
Contrary to what some people would have you believe.
had, it's that grand plan about trying to bring them all together. But ultimately, we want to be in a position where we can start to focus and connect all of the gameplay systems. And I think this is a key part of that.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting. This TDD, we're going to have to get in the habit of calling it TDD now, doesn't just open up the life of
TDD means something completely different to me. I think test-driven development. So that's going to be weird for me to hear.
of the folks who own these ships and combat. I'm really excited about it opening up, like you said, repair,
Oh, he's saying TTD.
refueling, rearming, all these things.
Absolutely.
It's like your ship hull is still there. Even passenger transport, like, hey, I need to get back to my to my ship, but maybe it's still in a conflict zone and everything, so I need help to get back. There's so many opportunities that increasing the lifespan of these ships gives to the game.
And just to be clear as well on that front, they're not end game professions either.
No.
Every profession in the game should have a starting location, so you can become self-sufficient if you want to play by yourself and you want to try and figure it out on your own. But then you can also engage in the community and be online. So there's definitely avenues that are available to you.
You mentioned the difference between PvE and PvP. So these changes on the surface sound great from a player versus player standpoint, from a player making their life in the verse, but trying to do some of our more basic missions and realizing that, okay, well, this time to disable change could make some of those missions tedious if it were applied unevenly across.
There's two things to take into account. One is the fact that if we look at the balance across the entire game right now, and I'm going to say end game, the current end game, because the current end game really kind of finishes with medium ships. We don't really have the large ship gameplay that we want to add. But the current end game is probably too easy, and the current starter position in terms of the balance of these missions is too hard.
Give us some for the PvEers.
And the second thing was for PvP and PvE. So you kind of have this opposite end of the spectrum. You have this end of the spectrum, which is PvE side, where we want you to be the hero. And in that scenario, while we want to have challenging missions where you're going up against a high target bounty who's in a single ship and his ship is really well repaired, but we also want you to be able to go up against 4, 5, 6 ships as an encounter. Where we're going to start balancing that aspect is that those ships will probably be owned by bandits or pirates, and they'll be less well repaired, so they will be easier to kill or easier to disable. So if you talk about the PvE side, I think more ships will end up going critical and blowing up, so that you're not left with just these 5 ships. And it's also part of the economy balance that we don't want you to just constantly be collecting ships, but ultimately we'll have that. We will balance it.
Those big heroic experiences where you feel like a badass killing.
You don't want to be fighting the same 5 things for an hour.
Right.
Exactly.
Disabling them all one by one. You want them all to go.
That's very interesting, and it makes a lot of sense. Because, like, if you don't have NPCs blowing up, that would seem to me to be definitely like a farmable situation where, like, you can spawn missions to create ships that you can disable and salvage, and it would definitely be like a way of, like, injecting more things into the economy that they might not want. But also, yeah, like they mentioned, just from like the cinematic standpoint, like if you think about Star Wars or something, like you want to be that badass flying through the asteroid field that is lasers and shit flying and ships just blowing up around you, like. But in PvE, I think it's very wise that they're kind of thinking about PvE and PvP totally different, and like what the differences in gameplay should be, and kind of optimizing around that. Far too often I see games not start that way. I see games past MMOs focus on like one or the other to the detriment of the other. So this is pretty cool.
And then on the PvP side, we want to make sure that, well, even if you're in a starter ship and you're in a starter ship and we go and fight each other, or I'm in a medium ship and you're in a medium ship, we don't want to be in a position where 5 seconds it's gone. But ultimately, I think you're going to get greater enjoyment if you had to work for it and you had to have some level of challenge.
100%,
and that's where we want to be in a position where we can look at PvE and PvP and we can balance them in a way that gives us the best experience for both of those players.
Awesome.
And I think this comes back to what I said at CitizenCon. We genuinely want to strive that everybody who wants to play Star Citizen, that there is a role in the verse for those players, and that they have something that they want to work towards and achieve. And ultimately, if they're going to, spend their free time we have a duty to make sure that we are providing fun for those players.
All right, so thank you guys so much. That's time to
That's
kill
awesome.
or time to disable, new term for the lexicon. Up next, we're going to ask John Crew to take us on a photographic tour of his 4 dogs. It's 2 Spaniels and 2 Labradors. Stay tuned.
That was really cool. We're gonna jump into part 2 of this next, just directly into the next interview. Yeah, that was really cool. I really appreciated the kind of thought they're giving to PvE versus PvP experience. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, things are just drastically different in those 2 worlds. Like if you're in a PvE encounter, like there's no chance of an enemy NPC crew like disabling you, boarding you, doing like that would be a ton of work to get that happening. So it makes a lot more sense that you're going to be optimizing for explosions on either side. So that is pretty cool. Another thing they mentioned in there was like the resource system. This is something we talk about in our org a lot. Obviously, the new flight model is a hot topic. I'm kind of hoping that resource management is one of the missing ingredients to making the new flight model feel better. That we could do a whole video on just that, which I'm not going to do I'm not going to get into that right now. So let's jump into the next interview. The next one is about capital combat. This one's exciting to me.
We return now to the IAE show, brought to you from New Babbage, site of this year's Intergalactic Aerospace Expo, and your guide to the future of spacecraft and vehicles in the verse. Today's topic, capital combat, with Rich Tyra, John Crew, and Jared Huckabee. Stay tuned, it's the IAE show, and it starts right now.
All right, gentlemen, thank you for coming back. We're here for part 2 of our discussion on the life of spaceships and Star Citizen. I want to follow up on something, Rich, that you kind of hinted at in part 1. You mentioned the Squadron 42 demo several times and this experience that was being built at. It's not just a cinematic thing for the start of the show. It's actually seems to be reflective of this capital warfare experience that we're attempting to build here. So I want to ask you outright, how is capital warfare supposed to work? What are we building towards, and why should folks be excited?
I think the first thing to sort of approach is it shouldn't just be the same gameplay as small ships, just scaled up. It needs to be, we talked about progression, it should be a progression of gameplay. So you can't just turn up, lob 50 torpedoes at a ship, press the I win button and go on. You've got to remove those defenses layer by layer. So capital ships have multiple defenses. Obviously they have turrets on them for shooting ships. They also have PDCs for disabling closer targets such as missiles and torpedoes, and then they have physicalized shield emitters, which is what you saw in the demo where Cal Mason sort of kites a Vandal ship into it. So you need to take all those things out in progression to stand a chance against a capital ship.
So it's not just a brute force thing. I know a lot of folks are imagining just coming in with an A2 and dropping a Moab on top of an Idris or something like this. It sounds like there's a puzzle to be solved here. Is that how you would say it, Rich?
Ultimately, capital ship warfare should be a puzzle that you have to figure out. If you actually watch that cinematic for the Squadron demo, you'll notice that one of the lines is, "Hey Cal, I don't think your weapons are large enough to be able to take out that shield emitter, or that shield Jenny, as they say." And he says, "You may be right." And that is actually true. You shouldn't be able to turn up with small ships and small caliber weapons against a huge capital ship. And it's what we
100%. Anybody remember Goon Swarm coming onto the scene and mobbing capital ships with small, insignificant ships?
touched on in part 1 in terms of the physicalized nature of the damage. If I fire a small caliber pistol at tank, it's not going to do much. The reason why we have like an Ares or a Retaliator is to allow you to soften up the capital ship shield so that you can actually then get access to the shield emitters and the PDCs and the weapons that are actually keeping your fighters away. And the way that the shield faces work is that they're underpinned by physicalized shield emitters, which are then connected to the core shield generator, or in large capital ships might have multiple shield generators. So ultimately, your first foray should be like, okay, which shield face are we going to try and soften up and dampen to weaken it, to be able to then send in our a squad of fighters to be able to target certain shield emitters, another squad to be able to target the PDCs, or in the case if you're taking a much larger ship, like a Javelin size, which will have flax. So you'll have to basically figure out, okay, this group or this squadron will take on this squadron will take on this, and this is where the hologlobe comes in terms of you're the admiral of the fleet, you're going, okay, right, I'm assigning you this target, and then if you're a fighter, you're going to then receive markers. And then obviously you're going to be connected to be able to say, okay, go now, I want you to attack now, because you need to have a coordinated alpha strike. If you just drip feed your damage over time, the capital ship will just be able to absorb it. So,
oh, that's exciting. Okay, yeah. So, as I'm hearing this, what I'm hearing is like they are thinking about the incentives for a ton of different roles. Because one of the things I hear a lot, like the question I hear a lot is like, well, why would I fly anything but an Idris? Like, pay to win, right? Like, just buy the Idris and win the game. Well, no, that doesn't sound at all like it. It sounds to me like if you roll up an Idris and you're trying to fight another Idris, or like, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot without a squadron of fighters backing you up. Like, you're going to need those small fighters to disable systems on the opposing Idris to, like it all works in like a concert. And this is the first time I've heard about like the hologlobe playing a role in combat. You see these things on ships right now, but I've never actually heard of what their intent would be like. But like as a captain, if you're looking at this hologlobe and you're able to use that to assign targets to squadrons of fighters so that they're actually seeing pop up on their visor, like, hey, here's your target, aim for this, like, that is awesome sounding.
This is where you need to be able to go, okay, what's my tactics, what's my high-level strategy? And then once you've taken out the PDCs and you've taken down a shield phase, that's when you've got essentially two options. One option will be to board, so you'll be able to then use our hacking gameplay, and then obviously you'll have to fight your way through to the bridge to be able to take over it. Or the other side is then you just, if your mission is to just destroy this ship, if you've taken down those layers of defenses like John says, that's where you then send in the torpedoes. So
that's cool as hell. Speaking of boarding, I had a question on this, which I haven't been able to find an answer. I haven't looked too hard, but I'm wondering if anybody else knows. I could drop a comment. Like, have they covered how they plan to portray boarding? Like, because I know like they have ships like the Legionnaire, which are going to be optimized for kind of like attaching themselves to an airlock and hacking the systems and gaining entry. But is the intent that something like a Legionnaire could attach to another vessel that is in flight or kind of trying to move to avoid being locked onto? Or is the intent that only once a ship's thrusters or whatever have been disabled, then you could board? Because I'm trying to think of like how they would like handle that within the physics of the game. Like, that seems like a very complex scenario to deal with, like where your attachment target is small, you have a player navigating this and a player navigating this, and trying to like get that all to align seems like it could be an almost impossible challenge, unless you're going to do something like allowing the player to lock from like some kind of a reasonable distance, and then the system kind of takes over the Legionnaire and guides it in effectively, or something along those lines. I hope we don't see another claw situation, which is why my brain's thinking about this. I haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about it, but that's a question I have.
Capital ship gameplay is, again, planned to utilize all the different roles of the different ships that we've made over the years, and it should be a significant challenge to be able to take out one of those larger ships.
Awesome.
Let's paint a picture here. What's one capital engagement supposed to be?
Well, let's just use Save the Idris event,
okay.
if you want to go through it.
Yeah, so realistically, when you're coming up to it, first thing you should be doing is scanning it so you know what you're going up against. You want to do a scan on it to work out where are its shield emitters, so then you can then plan, like, we want to take the right-hand side shield emitter down, so we'll mark that as a target, give it to that group.
You might be sending in a terrapin or a forward ship to be able to get scan data that then relays that back to you on the Polaris and your hologlobe, to be able to go, okay, now I've got some information to work with. How do I then approach
That would be
it from there?
sick.
Yeah, because one capital versus another capital is probably the worst scenario if it's literally two single capital. They need their fleets to reach their maximum potential. So you should be bringing these support ships with you. So yeah, you've scanned it, you've identified your point where you're going to be attacking, you assign a group of fighters from your ship or from your fleet, take
Again, I think it's worth repeating that whole you need a fleet of support to make this capital ship effective. I don't think people are thinking about that when they're thinking about calling the store citizen pay to win type of thing. Like, buying that capital's not going to do you much good. I think that, like, based on everything I'm hearing, acquiring the assets sounds to me like the easy part. The hard part is going to be organizing this many players into being an effective combat force. Keep that in mind. That's something I'm keeping in mind.
away their fighters, try and attack their turrets, and then you run another group to sort of bring down those shield emitters. The majority of them will be under the skin, so you need to scan to find their locations and then target them specifically.
Using ADS.
Damage penetration.
Or
to get through the hull.
precision targeting, as we should say.
So again, things like the two starfighters are great for this role. So you have the Inferno, the ballistics will penetrate through and damage it. The Iron, great to bring the shields down to allow those ballistics to go even easier to the hull.
You've got to take out PDCs as well.
Yep, PDCs as well.
So the PDCs won't just attack missiles and torpedoes, they will also attack other small objects. And so we need to make sure that you've created a safe zone or an entryway and you're punched through those defences, and then you've got your options of either boarding or destruction, depending on what your objective is.
Sounds like something ideal for a light fighter, just taking down the PDCs.
Absolutely, like light fighter, heavy fighter, but you won't just be able to penetrate the shields on a capital ship because they'd be so heavy. So you'll need to use relevant weaponry. That's where really the capital ship main weapons come in, because they're the ones that are actually doing the main damage on the shields to be able to soften it up, to allow their fighters and support ships. You can't just roll up and just try and out DPS it. I mean, you can, but you're rolling the dice. You know, is my capital ship going to be better than your capital ship? Am I going to be able to maneuver it well? Because that's the one thing to discuss about shield emitters. Right now, you have a shield generator that kind of creates a bubble, and we say, okay, this is this face, right face, left wing. And if you look at the wing, if you shoot the wing from the front and it hits the front of the wing, we just automatically work out like, okay, is that the front face or is that the left face? And for the player, that's not super obvious. So you want to be in understanding like, okay, well, the shield actually hugs the ship. So we need to know, well, actually that's the left face. So you as a player can go, right, that's what we're targeting, that's what we need to bring down. Because otherwise these shield generators are so powerful on capital ships, they'll just be coming back. And
throughout all of that, we've sort of assumed that the target ship is just sat there.
Absolutely.
You have the opposite, like you're on the ship.
The defender is spinning the ship around, trying to put their stronger side towards the attack.
You're seeing all this fire coming to this side, so you're now trying to maneuver yourself to avoid that. Counter players, they're trying to take out your thrusters to stop you maneuvering, so it is a big puzzle.
As they're describing this, can you begin to like think about or realize or why they don't want fighters zooming around at 1120 meters a second?
So shields down, PDCs cleared. And that's where this can go from a ship versus ship to a combined arms.
Absolutely.
Thing, which is really what's most exciting to me, this idea that you now have to send troops over to breach, you know, and board the ship.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also you might have to defend against being boarded.
Yeah.
So if you're going up against another player and they've got a Polaris and you've got a Polaris, or you know, when we add the Idris into the game and you're coming up, then you're going to have different mixes of gameplay when you're fighting over whether it's resources, station warfare, all the things.
They get chaotic. I feel for you other captains out there, like as you're trying to coordinate your fighter fleets and dealing with enemy soldiers on your ship and you know, all this stuff. Yeah.
That we've discussed previously. We've not really got to end game yet. Yeah. We're still really at mid game. End game is fleet battles and been able to utilize these large ships, and then that comes back to TTD if you do lose, or you need salvage, or you need repair, or you need to rescue the people that are still on the ship. These types of battles, these types of combat add and are underpinned by so much more gameplay than what we've just discussed today.
Imagine being
I think
stranded.
that's where it starts to connect the loops.
All right, so that's just a little bit about Capital Warfare. Thank you so much for sharing. Our viewers are going to be incredibly excited about that. The Polaris obviously makes its debut at this year's IAE, and while these systems are still in development and will continue to come out in 2025 and beyond, just having this vision intact here, people will be able to judge decisions that come in subsequent releases against the direction that we're going to. So thank you so much. Up next, I have to have a very uncomfortable conversation with Rich. He's a player in my D&D group, and he's been a little too min-maxy. So, Rich, let's talk about this, shall we?
Absolutely.
The classic.
We just had to have a chat with one of our gentlemen who was being a little too min-maxy the other day, so I totally get it. Anyway, I thought these clips were great. Capital Warfare, in particular, is super exciting for me. Like the vision as they're outlining it, like checks all the boxes I have. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Like, if you're not excited by this vision, I would love to hear why not. If you are, I'd love to hear why too. Like, I would love to hear all sides on this. I think the flight model changes that we're seeing, obviously, I don't think the flight model is perfect in its current form by a long shot, but I have been able to appreciate the direction they want to move. And like, as I'm hearing about these capital battles, like it makes even more sense in my mind why they need to slow things down. So that you can kind of have these really dynamic and interesting situations where, you know, the captain's on board with the holo thing, broadcasting targets, and you're circling this rotating capital ship, and there's boarding going on and all this stuff. I think slowing things down makes a lot of sense with all that stuff going on. As I said before, I would love to see resource management play a larger role in the flight model, and like encouraging people to like do manual power management to get. One thing I don't like about the change right now is like that manually having to toggle between flight mode and non-flight mode where your weapons are active. That doesn't feel good to me. I would love to see that managed more by active power management rather than like this toggle. Some stuff like that. I also question like, how does shield softening work? They mentioned that in the video, like light fighters not being able to do much until the capital ship has softened the shields of the other capital ship. Like, what does that look like, and how is that calculated? That's a question in my mind. Like, I would imagine that, like in most games I've seen, like if the shields have been taken down to a point where one thing can penetrate them, then all things can penetrate them. And if you're taking damage to the hull like that, it seems like you might very quickly in a situation where the ship is approaching destruction. But it sounds like they have something else in mind where like you can soften the shield to a point where certain things can penetrate, other things can't. I would love to hear more information on that. If you know anything about that, drop me a comment. I would love to be pointed in the right direction to increase my understanding on that. And the only other thought I had that I didn't pause the video for was like in Time to Disable, they were talking about like long-lived ships and recovering a ship and all that stuff. The only question in my mind on that is like, it seems that there has to be some level of ship destruction to keep things like the ship manufacturing market and all that going. So that's something I'll be closely watching. Like, how are they balancing like having like a desired amount of loss in the economy versus promoting recovery. And I'm all for the vision. Like, I think like me being incentivized to go recover my ship, rescue my ship, do all that stuff, I'm completely on board. But at the same time, I also think we're going to need some level of loss in the economy to fuel the economic engine of Star Citizen. So anyway, that's my thoughts. These were really cool shows. Hope you enjoyed them. And again, follow the link in the comment in the description. Go check out the community post that I'm going to post here in just a moment. That will allow you to toss a question up, and we're going to get to those in the AMA video that I record soonish. That should be a lot of fun. and I look forward to answering some interesting questions there. That's all for now. I'll see you soon. Bye all.